Their army of orcs has snuck into Meliora. Should they succeed, the invaders will easily overpower the realm and its guardians. It would be really nice of you to defeat them, otherwise the future will turn rather ugly very fast. You may not feel like you have big stakes in it, but I do find myself dreading the return of the grim reality I have worked hard to avert. Look out! Show these guys what we're here for, would you?
You ever dreamed of becoming Harry Potter? Nah, me either. More like a nightmare. That's not to say wizards are bad per se. Here we conjure up our magical powers in a similar style to Marvel's Doctor Strange, which comes alive thanks to VR. Tested and reviewed here on the PS4 and the Pro, but it's actually available on both the Vive and the Oculus headsets. It's a tale of time travel, magical beings, angry trolls and some awkward upskirt action. The premise is simple. This is a first-person wizarder that involves you learning your skills early on and then travelling through time to put an end to the evil sorcerer that is creating rips in time and those dangerous wormholes. Your mission is to save Meliora. See what they did there? A beautiful place ripe with wonder and magical abilities. You learn 6 of those early on during the game and then use them throughout your battle. The game takes around 5 to 6 hours to complete. It's a decent single player title and it's only £20 or around $25 or euros, so it's a decent priced game and it offers value. There are some extra features here, and if you bought the original release on PC you get these enhancements for free. In addition to the single player campaign, there's also an arena mode or horde mode where you basically do, as it says on the tin, fight off the hordes and try to get the longest and highest score with its online ranking system. The campaign itself is pretty fun. It mixes up the elements of actually exploring the area, working out the path, some puzzles, some decent levels of puzzles, and again, because it's VR and you're actually involved, everything takes on a whole new level of value, which I'm trying to show you here in the on-screen flat images, but it's never the same until you put the headset on. It's an enjoyable game, and the spell casting techniques are actually very good. I really enjoyed the difference between getting used to the move controllers. This game obviously does require move controllers, there's no other way around it. And the spells are sufficiently different, bar one, which I had an issue with. So occasionally during battles you can use all these different hand gestures which create all your particles or the fire effect or the electricity effect or your bow and arrow, but one of them, the actual fireball that you drag down and then expand to make it as big as you want and throw it, is very similar to the multiple missile one where you wave your hands in a very similar fashion. That can be occasionally picked up incorrectly in the game and you get the wrong side, so you either get the fireball when you want the missiles and the missiles when you want the fireball. It's not a huge issue, it does happen occasionally, just be aware of it, but it might just be my cack-handedness or at least my setup here being slightly too close. It didn't happen all the time, it was occasional, but overall everything works seamlessly and you get very used to using all those elements. And actually the gestures are very simple to remember, so when you start playing the game and you're in the heat of battle and enemies are hoarding you and fireballs are coming in and you're trying to look around to see where everything's coming from, you actually get used to just waving in a shield on one arm and then throwing fireballs with the other, then flicking over to the missiles to give yourself some breathing room and then moving around the arena. In addition to this, some of the areas actually have combat going on from the enemies and also the environment, with fire raging through the floor or other parts actually disturbing you, like I say, with statues hurling fireballs at you.
Oh, how I've missed these guys. Hey, a floor button. What are those called again? Pressure plates? Traps?
You know, you think being a wizard you'd be completely overpowering the enemies, and enemies can drop quite quickly. It's certainly not an easy game, and the extra element is by using the cards that you can pick up in the game, which are actually the fate cards, which modify the gameplay itself, so you can go back and give yourself less HP, or the enemies, you can give yourself a higher multiplier. There's all these trade-offs which increase your score and your value, but make the game harder or easier depending on where you sit. So again, there's quite a lot of replayability here, and it's around 5 or 6 hours of a campaign. It really takes me back. VR VR does generally to those arcade games of days gone by, where it was more about the experience and the short-lived love of the game rather than spending hours and hours on end playing a game and just disappearing up your own bum. That isn't the point of VR games. It's short in, short out, fast action and engagement. And again, this title works really well. Using the move controllers means you're involved in the game. You move your hands, you get used to turning your head, and you actually get really involved in the battles. It's really sad when you're sitting there making all these different spell casts. From the outside, I look like a complete muppet. My wife throwing me glances of certain disownment or possible divorce. But actually, playing the game, you don't feel that at all. You just get immersed, play the game and enjoy it. Sound is obviously a crucial part here. With a set of headphones it sounds much better, directional audio, monster roars, your magical powers, the voiceover that sometimes makes you laugh with that quintessential English accent, and then the music kicks in, heightening the drama.
I'm sure some structures are still unstable. The mine was abandoned for a reason. There's a powerful source of energy somewhere ahead. We must be going in the right direction.
Unsurprisingly, it uses the Unreal Engine, which is great for VR and again open source. World detail and construction is okay. It works pretty well when you're playing the title. Texture detail can be a little bit hit and miss, and texture filtering can be low. It's certainly lower on the PS4 than it is on the PS4 Pro, but they're both not amazing. But there's not a lot of interactivity with the world. There's certainly certain points where you have to break through walls or break through secret areas or even just make progress in the game itself. And there is some levels of destruction. Certainly the statues break down in with some kind of physics-based destruction. The walls do as well, and all that adds an additional element to the visual package. And there are some great enemies in the title, certainly large looming dragons and large enemies that come out of the floor, and some ones further on that certainly impress and make you feel how tiny you are in this large world. And even the basic trolls come out and make you look really tiny, that kind of scale that you can only get in VR. There's some weaknesses in the area, certainly in terms of the effects. They could have done more with the fire effects, the lightning effects. I love that power, and I think it would have been really good to add more flamboyancy to it, allow your hands to come apart and arc between your hands. You could have played around with that element a little more, but maybe again it's all down to the teams having the animation systems, the particle systems, or whatever the cutbacks were to get this running on the PS4 and the Pro. I don't know what the PC version runs like, but a particle system and an element to add far more pyrotechnics to the effects as you're using them around you and arcing and destroying the environment would add a great deal to the game. It's not bad by any means, but like I say, it could be better. But it isn't the best looking game in VR, but that really shouldn't be a surprise because this is not a huge studio. It's a very small studio and it's a decently priced title, so it's not all about that. And you can forgive the image quality, which looks reasonably low level here. Once you're in the headset, it obviously works much better. And they've worked well to use that feature. It's very much an old school looking game. You've got lots of pre-baked shadows, lighting in the game, no real dynamic lighting overall. So they've certainly made obvious sacrifices to keep the performance levels high. And some of those work into the gameplay itself. So like pretty much every game now that I cover on the PSVR, the headset movement is obviously 120 Hz as required, so whenever you move your head in the game, it's 120 Hz. Here you can see a very brief frame rate analysis, but it's not really relevant. You can see the dips in the frame rate. Now what they are is where my head doesn't move, or it doesn't move sufficiently enough to alter the image to be classed as a brand new frame. So what that means is the game simulation, just like I covered in previous games, it runs at half that frame rate at 60 Hz. So when enemies in the game logic, the animation, the locomotion and the looping system all runs at 60 FPS, which means you don't really feel it, but you can see it when you're analysing it here. And again, like many other titles that target high frame rates or even just the standard frame rates, they've made other cutbacks. So clever, intelligent cutbacks on the GPU and the CPU. Things like when enemies, when they're killed and they become non-interactive and animating, their animation drops again by half, down from 60 to 30 Hz. And you can certainly see that when they're up close with that juddery movement. It's a minor quibble, but unlike other titles where it's much further in the frustum and you can't notice it as much, everything with VR is much closer to you, so when you've got it right in your face, you can certainly certainly see the cutbacks here. Other games also use similar techniques, not just VR titles. Again, it's an element to be aware of. The other part of that is they've obviously cut back some of the areas in terms of texture filtering. You can see that drawn in quite close. It's slightly better on the PS4 Pro than it is on the PS4, being very low on the PS4, probably 2 times, 4 times. And because the fact that the game just uses flat textures, like I say, like old school games, it doesn't use materials very often, so it tends to be far more obvious when you've only got one single layer of texture for the entire object. So ground, moss, rocks, all those areas all look flat, so you can see it quite obvious. Again, harking back to the early 360 and PS3 games. But again, it's a decent title overall in terms of visual quality. The PS4 and the PS4 Pro differ slightly. So speaking to the developers themselves, they already told me that the resolution is high, and I can confirm that. So the PS4 base comes out at 1536 by 864. Doesn't look dynamic, it looks completely fixed, and overall it's a pretty sharp looking title in the headset. Certainly one of the best. I've certainly played lower visual quality titles in the game. Again, it harks back to the sacrifices I've just mentioned, which deliver those levels of visual quality in the headset. And the Pro looks to be a fully native 1920 by 1080. Now it may go higher than that, but I can't get any higher outputs than that level, so that's where I'm capped out at. And again, it's obvious, you can see the sharpness increase, you can see the improvements in the image quality itself. It has some little touches in the game's water effects, certainly darker caves bring the vignette on the screen actually further in to make it feel more claustrophobic, which I quite like. You can notice that in the darker cave areas. And then there's things like point lights being emitted from some of your fire effects. So if you're standing in front of this metallic gate here, you can see when I move the fireball away from the screen view, it's emitting a point light or directional light onto the actual metallic object of the gate, and you can see it reflecting in the screen. There's these little touches throughout the title which just embellish it a little more to make it feel far more flamboyant overall. I did enjoy playing this title, and that's, like I say, it's nice to have a single player campaign in VR, which feels like it's actually got some merit. I love the fact that you've got this headset constantly bickering in your ear hole, the humour that comes along with it, making jokes about the environment or where you are or how well you're taking out the enemies, or even if the bad guy is somehow connected to him, but I won't ruin the story for you. I've obviously kept the spoilers here low because it's not a long campaign, like I say, and I don't want to ruin some of the best bits in the title, but you get an idea of the visual quality here and the elements that can add to it. And there is a lot in the title overall to bring you back a few times over the period of that £20 being more than I think worth and good value for money for what you get. If you do have a VR headset and you're after a good, decent arcade style first person shooter, this is actually very engaging overall. I do enjoy those kind of titles in VR, and here it's much better because it draws you in by that physical interactivity. And again, it's a nice looking title with great elements, and I like the mixture of puzzle and exploration and battles, even if sometimes you can walk into those Devil May Cry warped off zones and just battle the enemies until they warp out. But it works well in Devil May Cry, and it certainly works well here.
I will not be stopped.
But that's about it for me. I'm out of here in my chariot of wizardry. Or whatever you use. Broomstick, I suppose? I don't know, something. I hope you enjoyed this. If you did, please like, share, where appropriate, subscribe to the channel, follow me over on Twitter, and all those good things. Or not. Take care. Bye-bye.
Oh, this is too much to take in. And now, we're fighting a revenant. By chaos, I need a vacation when this is all over.